Good evening, gentlemen. I'm sure we all had quite a lovely and awesome day. Alright, so welcome to tonight's online session. I'm still your host, O.O. Stevens, and we are going to be looking at the topic Professional Discipline of Legal Practitioners. Professional Discipline of Legal Practitioners in Professional Ethics and Conduct. And this topic is concerned with the offenses for which a legal practitioner can actually be convicted, the bodies that can actually investigate and discipline a legal practitioner for such offense, the likely type of punishment that such a legal practitioner would ordinarily suffer, and other miscellaneous matters. Now, what are the offenses for which a legal practitioner can be disciplined? One is infamous conduct in a professional respect. For instance, if your client gives you money and you misappropriate it, or you put that money for your own personal use, such is an infamous conduct in a professional respect. Number two is conviction by any court in Nigeria for any offense, whether an imprisonment or not, which is considered incompatible with the status of a legal practitioner. So, for instance, if you have engaged in any type of act that is incompatible with the status of a person called a lawyer, and you have been convicted by any court in Nigeria for the said offense, then such can be a ground for which the body that are responsible for disciplining legal practitioners can actually bring you before them and also discipline you. In other words, the rule of double jeopardy does not apply here. Maybe you would raise and say, but the court had already convicted me and I have suffered my conviction. Why is the Legal Practitioner Disciplinary Committee bringing me before them again? The implication is that it is an in-house regulation. So once you have been convicted by any court in Nigeria and the reason for which you're convicted was for an act that is not desirable of a person who calls himself a lawyer, then such can actually be a ground for you to be brought before the disciplinary committee. It is worthy of note here that that conviction must be by a court in Nigeria. In other words, where it is a foreign court that convicts such a person, it does not fall under the purview of this particular type of offense. So we need to note that. Also, obtaining enrollment by fraud. Obtaining enrollment by fraud can actually be a ground for a legal practitioner to be disciplined. For instance, if you even go to university and you are not qualified ab initio to go to university, it can be a basis. For instance, now you didn't enter university with the necessary result or with the right result, and you ended up becoming a lawyer tomorrow. And if such is finally investigated and it is noted that indeed such was the case, then it means that you obtained enrollment by fraud. Also, when you have not already graduated from the law school and you had already gotten an enrollment number with the Supreme Court and you are practicing as a lawyer, if you are actually discovered, such in itself is an obtaining of enrollment by fraud, and it can be a ground for you to be brought before the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee. Also, the next is misconduct, which, though not amounting to infamous conduct, that is incompatible with the status of a legal practitioner. For instance, this particular one falls under the purview of, for instance, where a lawyer is drunk and he is staggering on the streets. Also, where a lawyer fights on the streets, or where a lawyer engages in unnecessary street bickering. Such can actually fall under the purview of misconduct, which may not really in itself amount to an infamous conduct, but such is incompatible with the status of a legal practitioner, because law as a profession is a very sacred and sober one. So any person who considers himself a lawyer ought to actually maintain that integrity or that status of a lawyer, both in the courtroom and outside the courtroom. Now, what are the organs that are responsible for the discipline of these legal practitioners? What are the organs that are responsible for the discipline of these legal practitioners? One is the body of benchers through the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee. In other words, the LPDC are actually gotten from among the body of benchers. They are those that would ordinarily sit on the matter of any lawyer that is actually found to have committed, or any lawyer that is actually under investigation of having committed any of the above offenses that we have outlined. So the Legal Personnel Disciplinary Committee are is one of the bodies that are responsible for the discipline of legal practitioners. The next body, or the next organ that is responsible, is the Supreme Court of Nigeria. So the Supreme Court of Nigeria is also responsible for the discipline of a legal practitioner. The next is the Chief Justice of Nigeria. The Chief Justice of Nigeria can, as an individual occupying that office, discipline a legal practitioner without any further ado. But the powers of the Chief Justice of Nigeria is only limited to suspending the legal practitioner for a specific period. So a Chief Justice of Nigeria cannot order for the name of that particular legal practitioner to be removed from the role. He can only suspend such a legal practitioner for a specific period of time. But before a legal practitioner would ordinarily be investigated, there ought to have been a complaint that would be laid against him by an interested person, or by a person that maybe has suffered an injury from the act of that legal practitioner. And when the person now finally drafts the complaint, what bodies or where would the complaint be lodged? So any complaint against a legal practitioner would be lodged to either of the following bodies. One, you can send the complaint to the Chief Justice of Nigeria, that is to his office, or you can send the complaint to the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation. You can send it to the Office of the President of Court of Appeal or Presiding Justices of Court of Appeal Division. You can send it to the Office of the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, or Chief Judge of the State High Court, or High Court of FCT. You can also send it to the Office of the President of the National Industrial Court. You can also send it to the Office of the Attorney General of a state. You can send it to the Office of the Chairman of the Body of Benchers. You can send it to the Office of the President of Nigerian Bar Association, or Chairman of any MBA branch. So these are the places that you can send your complaint as an interested person, or as a person for whom has suffered any damage by virtue of the act of such a legal practitioner. And when the complaint has been lodged, what are the procedures for the discipline of this legal practitioner? One is that the complainant, after having sent it to any of the above bodies, upon the receipt of the complaint by any of the above bodies, it shall be forwarded to the MBA for investigation. So assuming it is the CJN that the complaint was forwarded to, then he will definitely send it to the MBA, either the MBA president. Then the MBA president may now send it now to the MBA branch where the legal practitioner is registered with. But all these ones now are not what you're going to be telling law school. So let me just give you the procedure of how the legal practitioner will be disciplined. One, the complainant shall send the complaint to any of the above bodies. Two, upon receipt of the complaint by any of the above bodies, it shall be forwarded to the MBA for investigation. Three, the committee constituted for such investigation shall write to the legal practitioner to make his own written representation. Four, if after the investigation, where there is a prima facie case against the legal practitioner, MBA shall forward its report to the Secretary of LPDC. LPDC means Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee, alongside all documents used by it in the investigation. 5. The legal practitioner shall be tried by LPDC, and if he is found liable, he will be given any of the deserving punishments. Now, I want you to note that the standard of proof before the LPDC is proof on the balance of probability or preponderance of evidence. So the standard of proof in civil is also the standard of proof with respect to the proceedings before the LPDC. And appeals that are arising from the decision of LPDC goes to the Supreme Court. So if you are not actually happy or comfortable with the judgment of the Legal Personnel Disciplinary Committee, then you can appeal against such a judgment to the Supreme Court. Now let us look at the type of punishments that can be given to a legal practitioner when he has been found wanting. or when he has been found liable by the LPDC. One of the punishments is that they can order for his name to be struck off the roll of legal practitioners. So they can order, you know, when you are called to the Nigerian bar, if you go to the Supreme Court, you normally put your name in a book. That book is known as the roll. So the LPDC may order that your name should be removed from that roll. And by so doing now, all the years you have spent going to university to read law, all the years that you have spent going to Nigerian law school, such would become nullified, except in some instances whereby you may be considered and your name will be restored back to that particular role even after it has been removed. The next type of punishment is suspension from practice for either a definite or indefinite period of time. So you can be given suspension, and that suspension may be maybe for 1 year, or it can be for until the body considers you fit and proper to become a lawyer. So, and when it is until the body considers you fit and proper to become a lawyer, then such is an indefinite suspension, because nobody knows when the body is going to consider you fit and proper, nor knowing the yardstick for such a consideration. Also, admonition or caution. So you can be admonished or cautioned. Such is also in itself a type of punishment you can receive. Admonition means you will be advised against repeating such in furtherance or in a subsequent period of time. Also, there can be a direction for restitution or refund of the client's money or documents at the lawyer's disposal, or even his property. So assuming it's a situation whereby you have misappropriated or you have used a client property as your own use, the LPDC may order that you return those things that are at your disposal. Now, this particular punishment can either stand on its own or it can be in conjunction with the earlier mentioned punishments. So that is the 4 punishments that can ordinarily be given to a legal persona. But one thing you need to note about the offenses that a legal persona can commit is that law school may give you a scenario, and that scenario may actually have infamous conduct in a professional respect, because they will just tell you what type of offense or has been committed by this particular legal persona. Then if you tell them that, they may now tell you what other type of offenses can a legal persona be disciplined for. Then you now give them the remaining 3. So after the infamous conduct, you remember that you have obtaining enrollment by fraud. You remember that you have misconduct that may not really be infamous in itself, but it is incompatible with the status of a lawyer. Remember that you also have, if he has been convicted by any court in Nigeria. Please make sure you put any court in Nigeria. Don't just say any court in Nigeria, because it must be a Nigerian court. All right, let us look at restoration of the name of a legal practitioner that has ordinarily been struck off the roll. How can his name be restored back to the roll? Now, before the name of a legal practitioner which was struck out can be restored, LPDC must consider the following factors. 1, about the gravity of the offense. 2, the remorsefulness of the legal practitioner. And 3, whether the legal practitioner is now fit and proper. So LPDC will consider, first of all, this thing that this person did, is it really a type that his name should even be brought back to the roll? For instance, now if it is shown and it's established that a legal practitioner indeed was an armed robber that even the CCTV camera covered it was everywhere in the news, and they said that this person was caught to the Nigerian bar. So this type, is it really a type of person that can actually be brought in to be representing people in court? Because by that type of attitude, then people would ordinarily lose confidence in the bar. So legal practitioners disciplinary committee, if this lawyer, after having been his name having been struck off the roll, decides to maybe apply for him to be considered, legal practitioners disciplinary committee will have to first of all look at what did you do before your name was struck off the roll. If it is a type that is very, very grave, then the legal practitioner will, no matter your application or no matter your plea, they cannot ordinarily restore your name back. Also, they will now consider the remorsefulness. But remorsefulness of this legal persona is going to be in tandem with the type of offense that he has committed. If the offense he has committed is a type that confidence has been lost in the legal practice, then his remorsefulness is not going to hold any water. But if it's a type that maybe he was drunk or maybe he fought in public, all those stuff, this cannot ordinarily be what somebody can actually get provoked and he can do. So if he is remorseful, then legal persona may actually consider and restore his name back to the role. Also, whether the legal persona is now fit and proper. So it's not just enough for you to be remorseful. We also have to check over the years that you were on this suspension or your name was struck off the roll. Has there really been any other thing that you have been doing that is inconsistent with the status of a legal practitioner, or you have really been yourself and respecting yourself? That is actually one of the yardsticks to measure whether you are indeed fit and proper for this. But remember, I told you that judgment of the LPDC can only be appealed at the Supreme Court. Earlier, there used to be the LPDC Appeal Committee, but the present position is that it goes to the Supreme Court by virtue of the case of Mwatolo versus MBA. All right, on that, we're going to be drawing the curtain on the topic. And remember, we have, if any question is coming out in this particular topic, we have, by the grace of God, captured those areas. And if you're doing your associative reading, then this is going to be like a very viable modulator for you to actually know what you're seeing and what you're reading. Thank you so much, and do have quite a blissful night rest.